The button box is a memoir of really my grandmother's. My grandmother on my father's side, Bertha Zydek. She was born Bertha to Linda. When I was little, I was curious, as soon as I could talk, about who I was, where we came from, what were we? And I peppered my grandmother and my grandfather, everybody, with questions. Grandma was the most willing to talk. And later in life, I wrote down lots of answers, remembered lots of things. But later in life, there was we first started recording things on wire recordings, later Sony reel-to-reel recordings, later cassette recordings. And I recorded lots of conversations with Grandma. Some of them I lost, some of them I found, some of them got destroyed, some of them you can hear bits and pieces, some of them are solid all the way through. I decided somewhere along the line, late 60s, early 70s, that I would eventually type up some of this stuff in book form so that the whole family could know. Maybe more people than Grandma would be interested. And I began doing so. Some of the answers are, I was worried when we first, my publisher first let the book go, because some of her answers, she was very honest, and the answer could sometimes hurt people. Like she felt like she lost a whole division of the family over religion, and she was quite articulate about it. And there was laundry that shouldn't have been hung out in public that she was willing to talk about. Not everything. I asked her about things like how close did Grandpa come to breaking the law, because I knew he'd broken some laws. My dad told me so many stories when we'd go fishing, and we went fishing a couple times a month at least at Lake Kapowsin. And that's all we did was talk and fish. And Grandma always said that Grandpa had some close calls, but she never told me how close they actually were. When the second edition of this book came out, we had to put in the back of the book, he was actually jailed with his brothers for the possible murder of somebody. And some of it's really funny. And some of it very poignant, like, she didn't like all of the kids, all of the brides and grooms her children brought home, and she had 14 of her own, raised 4 cousins to boot. Some of them turned out to be gay, way back before there was gay pride, kids, and how Grandma dealt with that. And, and those were the days when, the streets weren't paved, and there wasn't electricity in the house, and if you wanted a root beer float, you made your own root beer and waited until it was seasoned and done, and then you made your own ice cream. So there's lots of history of the town and history of America. Grandma, after all, came to the Pacific Northwest in an ox cart. I remember when I was stationed in the Air Force in the 50s in Lincoln, Nebraska, she told me to stay away from the river because the Indians still had a lot of teepees down there. Well, they did when she went through, and then, by the time I got down there, it was a park. And she lived to see men walk on the moon. I mean, she saw all kinds of things. So the button box is a collection of all that, and I asked her very personal questions. Was Grandpa a good kisser? Oh, what you want to know that for, Freddie? Her part is hopefully written in a Polish accent. You don't ask a question like that, Freddie. No. What do you think? We had 14 kids. You don't think he was a good kisser? That kind of stuff. Were there any brides that your sons brought home that you didn't like? Oh, you don't ask a question like that, Freddie. No. But it was Dinah. Oh, I told Benny, she's not for you. And without, we wouldn't have Patty and Larry, so what you gonna do? That kind of stuff. So I hope that you'll enjoy the button box. I had a blast putting it together in some fear and trepidation, but my relatives who I was afraid would be hurt weren't hurt. They were endeared. and gave me additional information that had I known, I would have asked Grandma about. But I didn't know at the time, and so some of that stuff is just footnotes in the back of the book in the second edition. So, if you're Polish, or a Zydek, or a Talinda, or just interested in what life was like in the late 1800s, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, she lived to be 101 or 102, but I stopped interviewing her in about 1973. That's when I moved to Nebraska. So the interviews pretty much stopped there. Hope you enjoy it as much as I did.